what is the relationship between self-realization or self-actualization? And just to clarify those two terms, self-realization being more aligned with non-dual traditions, the realization of the true self, the dissolution of separation, or at least the dissolution of the illusion, and self-actualization, a term that's more commonly associated with psychology. What is the association between those two? And eccentricity, being a quirky individual, I think is a reasonable exploration, because there does tend to be, at least from my viewing and from my perspective, a bias towards associating eccentricity with some form of spiritual development. It's not that that's untrue. Generally, if someone has done the work to feel their own sense of inner liberation, they're going to act more in accordance with what feels really true to them in an unconditioned way. And that behavior might appear different from the norm, not as homogenized with culture. So there's truth in it. But at the same time, this conflation creates the bias that there is a direct correlation, right, between the two. Is that an issue? Not entirely. But egoically, from a position of ego, the act, the play, the desire to be eccentric in a way that is not authentic, but is actually coming from various different intents, can be justified through this idea that eccentricity means being spiritually evolved. What do I mean by that? We can tangent into this idea of radical honesty. I can't stand radical honesty as a concept because, well, I think it's bullshit. I think that it actually takes the partial truth that honesty is a good thing and overlooks the nuance and complexity of human relationships. Of course, even in Buddhism, for example, the idea of right speech isn't just to say whatever's on your mind. And I think that a lot of people who practice radical honesty actually just, want to justify a lack of tact, a lack of ability to have empathy for other people and how messages are received. And you also see this quite a lot with people that are empaths, or they see things in other people and act surprised that people are upset when they're just kind of dropping truth bombs left, right, and center. Of course, part of human relating is not to cushion or to be inauthentic in the way that we communicate, and that honesty is crucial, but honesty has to be accompanied by wisdom and compassion. And a lot of radical honesty decouples from wisdom and compassion and just prioritizes honesty over everything else, right? I think if anyone has had a nourishing or nourishes their relationship, you will know very quickly, it doesn't take a lot to understand that there are times where honesty is going to cause hurt and upset, and there's a way to communicate something that's useful. So the reason I use that as a tangent is because, again, using this idea of being evolved or being liberated to be eccentric follows a very similar pattern to that idea of radical honesty, in that there can be a showmanship and a desire to show off or to act as one pleases without necessarily considering or worrying or being concerned with other people, and that to be flaunted as a noble act. And I'm only talking about when that is the case. Like, I think eccentricity is a beautiful thing, and I actually know I've got a lot of work in terms of being able to flourish certain parts of my character that I hide and that I run away from. So I'm not covering this as like an ability to be authentic, but what I'm trying to point at is when eccentricity is less about authenticity, but is more about doing as one pleases without worrying about the consequence, or having certain behaviors to draw attention, or wanting to be disruptive, not because it's authentic, not because it's ingrained in some kind of like higher spiritual truth, but because that person has other intentions, right? And I do think that the issue is this idea of crazy wisdom that has become common knowledge with some gurus who treated their students in crazy ways, but is, you know, apparently guided by higher principles that the students couldn't see. There is a risk that in pedestaling and revering eccentricity, we're projecting our own unmanifested character traits onto someone and then conflating that with positioning that person at a place of higher spiritual evolution in a way that is inaccurate, and then pedestaling and actually validating a way of behavior that's coming more from an egoic tendency to want attention or to crave difference as a mark of, you know, self-assigned significance. There is a skill and a wisdom in conforming at times. There is a skill and a wisdom in flourishing individuality and being eccentric, and there's a wisdom in discerning between the two. I think the importance is not to conflate eccentricity with spiritual wisdom, because there are a lot of eccentric people who like to think that it's coming from that space, when actually it's a much more self-serving process at play. And I think discerning between the two is really important, not only in other people, mostly within ourselves. Like the way in which we're being eccentric, how are we fueling that behavior and what are we looking for? And I almost find that the more I authentically manifest or act upon parts of my character that I'm afraid to, my own eccentricity, I actually look probably more normal, because I feel like my adaptive strategies are more attention seeking or attention avoiding, and therefore my actual true authentic eccentricity looks more homogenized than if I was trying to get attention, etc. So these are just a few thoughts. I've got no idea if this will resonate, but let me know if you notice within yourself or within other people of certain prominence, whether there's this conflation of eccentricity and freedom, or eccentricity and wisdom. If eccentricity is coming from a desire to get attention, or a desire to just act as one pleases without any care for repercussions, is that really coming from a place of spiritual wisdom? I don't know. Maybe it is, and maybe I'm misinterpreting the whole thing, but I'd be intrigued to hear your perspective.